What would you say is the biggest misconception that people have about just investing and getting, hopefully financial free someday?
I think it's not people, it's the young generation. It's those in their 20s and 30s misconceptions that they need a lot of money,
right?
That they have time to wait. The misconception there is that they don't understand the value of compound interest. You earn 1%, and then that percent earns 1%, and that percent earns 1%. So you got to start young, and it's difficult. But if you put $20,000 away in your 20s to 30s, it'll grow to a larger value than if you put $60,000 away in your 30s to 40s. So it's the right time is to start now and just get a habit. Develop the habit of putting some money away for yourself.
It's so funny you say that. I read a book. It was called The Automatic Millionaire. And they had a section. This is back in the days when you could only put $2,000 into your retirement account. And I remember this saying, if you started at 18 and stopped at 25, and someone else started at 25 and did it till they were 65, the person who started at 18 would have more money than the person who started at 25. And people look at you like that's crazy. In today's world, you can go online and look at investment calculators and play with the numbers. And it's amazing what happens if you're in your 20s and 30s and you have 30, 40 plus years of time for this to compound. It's amazing how little money you need to start off with for it to grow to numbers that are pretty darn big.
In my career, I have had family members that were the children and sometimes the grandchildren. And we got them to put $25 away a month, then to $50 away a month, then to $100 away a month. And I get calls today from those kids. Can't wait to get their account to us because of the fact they have it.
Yes.
And now what do we do with it?
Right.
Because they started young and they made it a habit. And that's the important thing. You need to make it a habit.
So how do you recommend that they get started? So what would be a way for them? Because I know people think, hey, I do need a lot of money to get started. And it's funny because my daughter, who's obviously everyone's knows and sees these days, who's getting ready to turn 24, we started and she had no clue even where to begin, even with me being her dad. And so where would you tell people to get this process started?
We talked earlier about the technology that we have today. And the kids today have this opportunity to go online to a number of good financial websites. They can buy fractional shares of stock. They can buy fractional shares of mutual funds. And they just need to set up an online account in their 20s and 30s. They don't need really a whole lot of knowledge, and they need to not listen to what's going on in the news because they don't need this money until they're 60 or 70. And they need to invest in a good Standard & Poor's 500 fund and do automatic investments every month. Start at 25, start at 50, start at 100, and utilize the dividend reinvest option of that and see what that does in 10 years. It will blow their minds at what kind of money. They got to be resolute and
continue.
I want a new car. Well, I'm going to sell this. No. This is money you don't touch, but you need to use on that online methodology retirement vehicles where you're not paying tax on your growth.
And when you say Standard & Poor's, I know the terms I typically hear would be Dow Jones or the NASDAQ. So what is that?
Well, the S&P 500 is 500 companies that are rotated in and out over the years that create the S&P 500 index. The Dow Jones is a 30 fund index with 30 stocks, So the S&P 500 has a larger diversification. You can go into even larger funds, but the S&P 500 is such that it makes a good diversification into all sorts of equity over the long run without them having to look at it. They're constantly growing by the 500 biggest and best companies in the world in that index.
And those companies will change over time. I tell people it's not the same 500 companies that it was 10 or 20 or 30 years ago. Those things will continually change over time. Do you think it makes sense for them, especially if you're like starting off from $0 rather than just jumping online, is to go find someone like yourself or find someone to go talk to how to, like, the best way to get this thing going?
Yeah, they could go talk to me. That would be great. And I'd love it. Or any other financial advisor that wants to take the time for a $25 account. Not many advisors do, right? And the younger generation, they want to look at the phone. They want to be able to see everything right there quickly. That's the way we're going. My industry is going to be very, very light in the next 10 to 15 years because we've got artificial intelligence that's now showing that it can compete. But, go back to Warren Buffett, the S&P 500 over a period of 10 years has beat most of the analysts out there and all their great picks, and you don't need to make it confusing. The one thing that frustrates me is the input that we have and the news that we have. We have all these guys in suits and ties and screaming and yelling and talking this and talking that. TV shows. You got better things to do. Your career, your family, your home, your hobbies, the money will grow. it will grow. And I have thoughts on that to share, but it will grow if you do it. You have to do it.
Well, we tell people all the time, like when you really look at those things, and I like to read a lot of books, but when you read these books, you learn about the basic things. They talk about hedge fund managers and all these people. If you just kind of stay in the ETFs and mutual funds and just sort of don't get too complicated with things, you're going to earn your 8, 9, 10%, whatever it might be. Everyone has a different number. And then they want to talk about before inflation and after inflation and all that. I go, at the end of the day, just keep doing it. And when you have lots of money at the end, then you can have that argument with somebody when you're trying to figure out what to do with your 6, 8, 10, $12 million now I got to pay tax or not pay taxes. I did it in a 401k or a Roth IRA or whatever it is. But if you're not doing it, there's going to be nothing to even worry about anyway.
Exactly. And you mentioned the reading of books, okay? And this is an important one for young generation, okay? And my dad taught it to me when I first got in this business at 26. The Richest Man in Babylon. It's not a hard read. It's 80 pages.
It's a little book.
But what it says is save 10% of what you earn every time you get a paycheck. Pay yourself first.
100%.
You worked so hard to earn that dollar. Take a dime and put it to you. And then make that money work as hard for you as you did for it. Don't take on debt. And make sure, and you're going to love this plug, make your home a valuable investment. Right? The rest of it will fall into place over 10, 15, 20 years.
If
you don't do that, which I didn't do until I was into my 30s, you're behind. Right? And I've been fortunate enough to catch up. But I look at our kids and what they're doing with their investments, and I go, wow, I did not have that kind of wealth when I was 28 years old, 29 years old.
Well, and that's the key, is getting them started. I see a lot of content. Obviously, I follow a lot of real estate stuff about, people talking about you should just rent and take all your money and invest it into other real estate because they want you to treat your primary residence not as an investment. And I go, depending on where you live in different parts of the country, you got to be careful when people are talking about all these, just rent because it's cheaper to rent than buy. I go, because, they always want to say, well, your rent's going to be the least amount you're going to pay and your mortgage is going to be, your rent's the most money you're going to pay every month, which isn't true, actually.
Right.
And your mortgage is the least you're going to pay every month. But I'm like, in most markets, it's not these dramatic differences where I could go rent a house for $2,000 a month and the same house, the mortgage payment's going to cost me $5,000 a month. It's not that great a difference. But if owning does become a little more expensive, great. At the end of 30 years, you're going to actually have an asset that might be worth $1 million versus nothing.
Well, a perfect example is a group of entrepreneurs that go out and start a company in 2005. Instead of leasing a building, they buy the building.
Right.
And 25 years later, they own the asset and they get a huge check every month for the rent. When you're in your 20s and 30s, it's not a balance of whether or not rent is better or mortgage is better. Mortgage is better over a 30, 40, 50-year time frame. And as you get to a point where you have equity in that house, then maybe in your 30s or 40s, you can diversify with a rental property if you so want to, or upgrade or buy land or what have you. But these financial analysts that say, oh, you should just be in stock, you should not, that's wrong.
They're looking at
you
it as
need
a
to make
snapshot
your
in time.
home a valuable investment.
Yeah. Well, a lot of times they're looking at it as a snapshot in time.
Sure.
So, like, for example, I bought some rental properties a few years ago, and I was able to buy them in the 3 and 4% ranges, which obviously should never really have happened.
Right.
And now they're looking at rates. A year ago, you could get 8%. Now when we're doing this, we're somewhere close to 7% again. And you're always looking at this snapshot in time about. They're always talking about being an entrepreneur, always making yourself better, always invest. It's like you got to live somewhere, and you might as well make that work for you as well. And I always say, people who own real estate and they own a primary residence are typically anywhere 35 to 40 times wealthier than people that have rented their whole life.
Absolutely.
It's amazing to me how many people have rented for me forever and ever and ever. That whole story is another thing for
Makes
another
you
day.
wealthy.
It does make me wealthy, but it's always funny because they just want to take, like, at one moment in time, you could look at today, and maybe today, that specific house at today's rates and that rent, it might make more sense for the next 12 months that makes more sense to rent it.
Sure.
But long term, I would say I don't know a lot of renters that got wealthy long term unless they had a job that just paid some ridiculous amount of income.
And that's the other topic that is very important to remember.
Yeah.
There's no get-rich-quick scheme.
No.
You can try all the get-rich schemes you want. That's been my biggest failure in my life is I've tried a few of them.
Right.
It's a long-term drip. You just have to keep doing it and doing it and doing it. And just like what we experienced over the last 3 weeks, we've had a 22% correction in the market. So your dollar went down to 78 cents and now it's back up to 84 cents or 86 cents.
Right.
That's not material because as you're compounding and you're reinvesting your dividends, guess what? That dividend is buying more shares at the lower price.
Yeah.
And that over a 20-year period is phenomenally valuable.